We're a little biased because he's one of the finest human beings we've ever met. He is Marty Greenberg, and his impact on Marquette University, the basketball program, among others, is immense. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show with the incredible John Dodds and our producer, the great one, Jason Ruck. I'm Tom Pippins, and here's the aforementioned guest, Marty Greenberg. Marty, it's great to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. We've got your grandson, Justin. He's over there doing some producing for Jason, so we're all good. First of all, let's talk about relationships as you go back in your incredible career, talking about Al McGuire.
Al McGuire was just one of the most fascinating people that I've ever met. We became good friends. I helped him with his television contract. We created a professional basketball document for South Africa. Used to come over to my house every Sunday morning. He had a very much like to talk to my wife and sat there for 3 or 4 hours driving on his motorcycle. He was just a wonderful man. And at the time that he died, I sat with him playing with his toy soldiers on the floor of the nursing home that he was sitting in. I think about him all the time, just a wonderful man.
What were the interactions like as it related to his contract for TV?
He was a very good businessman and had a very good understanding of money and negotiation. And he just said, this is what I want, and it was easy. I mean, he was a star. It was easy to get whatever he asked for.
He would always say that I interviewed him in 99, and in that interview he said there's nothing more profitable than speaking. And he was able to speak on I think he said I spoke on 7 continents. He was all over the world speaking. And talk about that. And I think we went into compound interest in his 401k from CBS and then NBC. I mean, when you talked to him, you never knew exactly where it was going to go. But talk.
One of the great poets of our century. He had a magnificent way with words. And I can understand why he was so in demand for speaking, because it was like music. Everything he said was interesting and had not been said before. He could have had a book of sayings that would have lasted forever. And he was so fascinating to listen to. And maybe one of the smartest men that I've ever met. That's how he was. And any time that he would talk, I would go to hear him because I would learn something and I would learn how to say things differently.
He said, I can read and write at an 8th grade level, but I'm an Einstein of the street. He said, I was a bartender. I can size you up within 45 seconds just by looking at your demeanor. I know exactly, I can pigeonhole you. The interesting thing was, he hated the NCAA. He called it the NC2A. And there were times when he would raise the most interesting points. I remember I was 11 years old and 1972, Jim Jones had left, but Bob Lackey had been declared ineligible because he had associated with an agent. So the NCAA ruled that he couldn't play. And it broke news. I was watching primetime, and it was a big news break that Bob Lackey can't play, and my head was like this. But Al McGuire said the next day, he told the NCAA, listen, Bob Lackey's a citizen. He should be able to get legal representation or talk to an attorney or affiliate with an attorney just like everybody else can. And we have a law school, and NCAA, we're going to use. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he definitely was a street guy and could size you up immediately and knew what level to talk to you on. You know, whether you were a priest, whether you were a lawyer, or whether you were a bartender, Al McGuire could relate to anybody. And that's why he was so great to be with.
Marty Greenberg is our guest. This is the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show, and we are brought to you by Moonlight Graham, a proud sponsor of the program. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits, and Craig Caston is our MVP. Marty's impact, of course, is pervasive. Talk, if you will, Marty, about the Marquette Sports Law School. I think you had a little something to do with that. I know JD wants to chat with you about it.
Well, it all started When I asked the dean of the law school, I was actually hired to be a professor there 3 years after I started practicing law. And I taught real estate for almost 20 years. And I asked the dean if I could go to Fort Lauderdale to attend a conference on sports representation and sports agency. Okay? What I found out about this conference is that all areas of the law apply to the sports industry, and this would be a very, very good area for Marquette to specialize in the form of a sports law institute. So I went to the dean, and I said, why don't we start this by letting me teach a sports law course? And the dean said, not academic, not substantive enough. You'll never get away with our faculty in teaching that type of course, but we'll call it personal service contracts. Okay, so that's how sports law started at Marquette University. When I finally said to him that I think we can specialize in this, he said to me that there are no resources at the law school for this, and you'd have to find your own resources to create the National Sports Law Institute. Well, we went into his office. The first call was Bud Selig. Bud Selig says, I'm in for $100,000. Then it was next Bob Harlan. And next was the Pettit Group and Miller Brewery. By the time we got done, we had raised $500,000, and in 1989, the National Sports Law Institute was created. Now, I want to bring you forward to 2023. 16 courses, 15 professors, the longest sustainable law review in the United States, a sports law certificate. But more importantly, students who are matriculated from Marquette University Law School are getting jobs in the sports industry. I was recently at a dinner with my grandson, and they were honoring somebody from the Orlando Magic. Needless to say, all of the attorneys in the legal department of the Orlando Magic were Marquette University law graduates. So I am very, very proud of what has been done there. I can say without a doubt that it is the best sports law program in the United States, and it continues to improve under its current leadership and the support that it gets from the dean.
I was in law school at Marquette from 82 to 85, and your personal service contracts was my favorite class and my targeted class. I had a business background. I had worked with the media at Brewer games, Packer games, Bucks games, Marquette games, so I had the sports background. But I was at a get-together with the faculty, and the two faculty members who will remain nameless said to me, what's your favorite course, or what are you looking at to come to Marquette? I said, personal service contracts with Professor Greenberg. And they looked at me and they said, why would you do that? And I said, because I have the sports background, business background, but if you think about it, every discipline that you have in the school is represented by contracts, negotiation, in sports law. You have agency, you have torts. Unfortunately, you have criminal law sometimes, labor law. I mean, it all comes into one. This is like the hub of the wheel. And they looked at me and they weren't buying it, or they weren't agreeing with it. And I thought, if that's the vibe inside this get-together, what was the vibe inside the faculty lounge at that time?
I was not greeted with a lot of support by the faculty. They thought that this was Greenberg organizing a basketball game in the gym, and there's nothing academic.
Well, he did play for Washington Ferngolders, State, and he was a tough in the paint kind of player.
There was nothing academic about it, but for the faculty and their view on personal service contracts, we went ahead and have been successful. And one of the things when I was hired, I think you should know this, is I walked into Dean Bowden's office, and he said, we've been watching you for the last several years. We think you look like a professor. I started laughing. I said, I don't talk like a professor and think like a professor. Why would you say that I'm a professor? He says, we want you to be our professor here. I said, I can't do that. He handed me a property law book, and he said, on Monday, you're going to teach the property law courses here. I said, I don't know anything about property. I've been doing nothing but tax work. He said, well, fake it. And I've been faking it for the last 50 years, guys.
And impacting people along the way. We can't get away from Marquette basketball because of your many gifts and this big heart that you have. And in particular, I'm talking about Rick Majerus and negotiating his contract, the late great one.
Okay, I love Rick Majerus. Rick Majerus was one of my best friends for 20 years. Our families were great friends. I was great friends with his sister. And Beverly and I served a purpose, and that is we were mother and father surrogates to Marquette basketball players. I will tell you that we were very much involved in recruiting Glenn Rivers and Mark Murata, two of our favorites. Long-term relationships with Jerome Whitehead, Ulyss Payne, Michael Wilson, all because of Rick Majerus. And I'll never forget a recruiting trip with Rick. Took me down to Chicago, and we were recruiting this guard by the name of Thomas who played pro ball. And I said, there's a real advantage to going to Marquette and playing basketball there because you can eventually go to the law school and become a lawyer. I said, do you have any interest in becoming a lawyer? He said, of course I do. Most of my friends are criminals. So we were very active in recruiting Marquette and supporting that program. And Hank Raymond's son worked for me. And Rick Majerus was just a wonderful guy. So he got to Utah, and he says, I want you to negotiate my contract. I said, Rick, I'm a recruiter. I'm not a representative of coaches. I don't know anything about it. And he said, well, my mother likes you, and my mother said that you should represent me. She said, you find out about contracts and represent me. Well, it was fairly easy because I had a wonderful client who had a great record. What I remember about the contract is that everything was guaranteed. Whether he died, whether he was disabled, whether he was terminated, everything was guaranteed.
How did you get that in place?
Remember, I'm a professor and I'm intellectually curious, and with some time I can pretty much figure out anything. And basically, the contract remained unsigned for months. Okay? The economics were okay. The problem with the contract was the use of the words moral turpitude. Rick Majerus wanted to know what that word meant. Okay? He said, Professor, what does that word mean? I said, I don't know. And my classes that I've taught in contracts and sports, we can't define that. He says, well, how in the hell do you expect me to sign this contract? And what I did ultimately to close the deal is I said, Rick, is there anybody else who is interested in pursuing you? He said, yeah, the Nevada coach is going, and Nevada has offered me double of what Utah has offered. Well, that was easy. So I went back to the athletic director. I said, we're leaving. He says, you can't leave. You have a contract. I said, no, I don't have a contract. Okay, I have an offer that has not been signed. So he said, well, what is the problem with this contract? I said, moral turpitude. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to define it. I don't know who defines it. Get it out of the contract. He says, we haven't, he says, we're in a Mormon territory here. We have to have that clause. I said, no, well, then he's going to sign and he's going to jump. Moral turpitude gone. Contract sent to me by somebody in the school. It said, Greenberg, have him sign here and make sure you never come to the state of Utah. And I never went to visit.
Of course, we all know Rick Majerus, the late great former Marquette coach. The Jim Rat, John Dodds knows that well from Milwaukee. Coached at Marquette, went on to Utah and led the Utes to the national championship game and the run at Ball State, as you point out, a tremendous man. But I'm interested, too, you helped recruit. I think that's so. These kids would come into your home at times, you and Beverly, and hospitality and good food, and that had to be an experience.
Those players became part of our life, and it's the memories of that and the feelings of that are tremendous. And of course, the attraction is everybody would like to be a lawyer. once you get to be a lawyer, you're not so sure what you want.
A couple of lawyers here, everybody, and some guy who just talked to cameras for a living.
But we used the law school and the ability to get into law school as a recruiting device. And because I was in the law school, I had, the reputation and ability to say this might be something that's very good for you. And that's how we were recruited. I'll never forget the time that we were driving to recruit Glenn Rivers, okay? And the dean of the law school was in the back seat. I was in the front seat being a jurist was driving, okay? The jurist was looking this way the entire trip with the wheel like this. I thought the dean was going to have a heart attack.
What was that whole process like with recruiting one of the all-time greats, as we know, Doc Rivers?
A wonderful human being, a wonderful mother who went to his home outside of the Chicago area, convinced him that not only would he have a superior basketball opportunity, but he would have a wonderful academic opportunity. And he was just a wonderful guy. And, we kept in contact with his mother. And once again, my wife provided that little added ingredients of a mother away from home to attract these young men to Milwaukee. So it was a great period of our life.
She's an amazing woman, as we all know, and of course involved here with our producer Jason Ruck and the Project Pitch It show. That's pretty great stuff. Go ahead, JD. I want you to get some questions in here.
His playing career was great, but his coaching career has been unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. And as you say, Marty, just a character guy. His mother had to be a special influence on Glenn Doc Rivers growing up.
He was very, very much in love with his mother, respected his mother, and listened to her wishes. And I knew the one time that we had went there and sat with the mother, Marquette was going to get him, because his mother was convinced that Marquette was the right institution to be at, the Jesuit training, the Jesuit learning. I felt confident after that trip that he would be a Marquette Warrior.
When it comes to memory lane, there's no one greater in the history of Marquette University basketball than my friend and colleague, John Doss. The aforementioned Rick Majerus, of course, an assistant coach with Al and Hank Raymonds back in the day when you had two assistants as opposed to 25 or what have you. They win the national championship. What were your memories, Marty, of that incredible year, 1977?
I mean, it's the apex of anything that anybody wants in basketball, with great people running the show. I wanted to tell you one funny story about Al McGuire. Do you remember the old gym at Marquette?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. My father was not well. He had a heart condition. And Rick Majerus says, well, maybe he could be the guard of the gym. And I said to my father, would you like to guard the gym? He said, absolutely. So he would go to the gym every day. First thing he would see was Al McGuire. And Al McGuire said, your job isn't to guard the gym. Your job is to get me a cigar every day at Yuli's. And he said, these are the cigars that I like. So my father would go there, drive there, say hello to Al McGuire, drive to Yuli's, give him the cigar. That was his job. The memories are just so wonderful. I just can't tell you.
Yeah, Hank Raymonds, talking about Hank, I know both his son Steve was an attorney and Danny was an attorney. I talk about the Raymonds family.
Okay, one of the finest human beings I have ever met. Tremendous mind about basketball. Of course, he was the head coach. His family had an impact on my law practice. His son, Danny, worked for me, and we set up a closing real estate business that he was very successful in. And I just have, wonderful memories of just a kind, wonderful, direct kind of human being that he was.
Marty, your influence, again, it just is, it goes from one end line to the other. We're talking about the idea of representation, taxes, real estate, the founder of the Sports Law Institute at Marquette, and the impact that you have made on countless people relating to abuse in the sports world. We would be remiss if we didn't ask you to talk about that and how satisfying it must be in that difficult world to know that you're impacting lives in a positive way.
About 8 years ago, I got a call from a coach at Penn State University in the gymnast program. And she said, I'm worried about being terminated. I'm worried about my reputation. There is active and a culture of abuse in the gymnast program and at Penn State. And she said, what should I do about it? I said, I think you have to be upfront and righteous and do whatever is right. And we will try to get rid of the coaches. We will try to expose the coaches. And a year and a half later, both of the coaches, who were husband and wife, resigned or were terminated. I'll never forget the lawyer for Penn State said, Mr. Greenberg, you're an old man, go away. This is none of your business. And they said, yeah, abuse is my business. And what happened after that is I would get case after case. Auburn was another one. Rutgers was another one. Purdue was another one. And all of a sudden, it just became part of my practice. And what is so sad is abuse takes the form of mental abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. And now you're reading all about hazing, which is really sad. And the mental health effects on these students is incredible. In the Penn State situation, I saved 2 girls from committing suicide. That's how bad it was. And we sit now here 8 years later. And I'm getting 2 calls a month of people who want me to represent them in abuse cases. I've been asked to be an expert witness in the Harvard case. I have a case right now that involves cheerleading at the University of Alabama. I have 2 cases that involve MLS. What I can't believe is with all the exposure and all the negative publicity that universities have received, that this is still here. And maybe with the Northwestern and Mexico State University, the hazing, the allegations, and the reporting of what went on in those programs, maybe it will make universities take a real forthright step in erasing this and having procedures and contract provisions that get rid of abuse in college athletics. It has not happened in 8 years.
In addition to starting the personal service contracts class and then the National Sports Law Institute, Marty's written books on sports venues. And what's interesting is 1982, you look at the sports venues that Milwaukee sports teams had compared to today, and the Green Bay Packers had a field with wrought iron, green wrought iron that would probably be used for events maybe 15 times a year. And the Brewers had County Stadium and the Bucks had the Mecca. Talk a little bit about Milwaukee and their venues, how much they've improved over the last 40 years.
Okay, so I had a background. I taught real estate law for 20 years and had written 8 books on real estate, some just how to practice, some case books for school. And I did a lot of public speaking in Wisconsin and nationally about real estate and loved the area. And suddenly I was cast into this Sports Law Institute, and I said to myself, with all of the stadium boom going on between the 1990s and 2010, wouldn't it be great if we jumped on the idea of sports facility development? And we did this in 3 fashions. First of all, we created a course, and the only course in the United States Law School that dealt with sports facility development. The university gave me several interns, 3 years original research, and we produced the book called The Stadium Game. It was a book about basically how you build a stadium. And the book went out at $495. It was 1,000 pages, 5,000 pages of forms, sold out in 2 weeks. Sold out in 2 weeks. I've been asked to update it, but I just don't have the energy. We had conferences on sports facility development in Milwaukee and Los Angeles, and I've had some dealings with the local sports facilities. I was on the baseball board and have I helped the Brewers out with respect to their naming rights and valuing their naming rights and making a report on that. I've taken a look at the issue of capital improvements and extending the lease. I had joined up with a group called Shear Game. Carl Shear was the former commissioner of the ABA, and Game was my stadium game. And we did consulting work for 5 or 7 years on stadiums throughout the United States, whether they be college or professional. There has been a tremendous change, as you have said, from what we knew as tinker toy stadiums to now state-of-the-art stadiums that can be $1.5 billion, some of the new ones. The Brewers are looking at least according to assessments, at approximately $400 million of improvements, whether they be fan experience, fan safety, league imposed, or just things that need to be capital repaired. And we're sort of back to where we were in right before 2000 as to how to fund this. But I need to tell you that the Brewers are not relocating anytime soon. It is Bud Selig's legacy, and that team needs to be here to maintain that legacy for probably the best commissioner ever in any sport.
Right here in our own hometown. He wasn't appreciated. Right? As the prophet did not appreciate it. What an impact he had on the game. And like you, Marty, just an amazing man. When it comes to those stadiums and everything going on, we talk about the Brewers franchise from Old County Stadium, right, where Davey Lopes, the former man, hey, my sinuses are bad. We've got moles here. There are rats running around me. Great history. But it's a whole new ball game, isn't it?
Yeah, and what has happened is we have discovered the advent of what we call the public-private partnership, where essentially the public funds through a tax supported by bonds, but the ownership or charities or business groups also create monies for these stadiums. And we've developed what is called a public-private partnership, and that is the way that we've been able to sell this to the public for purposes of maintaining or getting a team.
Marty, you're an amazing man, a gifted man, but as I say, we're just so thankful to have a dear friend. I know you will, with every breath, continue to impact people positively. It's been an honor, and I believe this show, one of the most important ones from the perspective of everything that you've covered. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Okay, so Marty, appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah. For John Dodds and our producer, Jason Ruck, I'm Tom Pippins, everybody. We're so grateful to have you again on the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show. It does not happen without Craig Caston. Moonlight Graham, Modern Dental Benefits. Moonlight Graham, a proud sponsor of the program. So for the aforementioned fellas, including our special and honored guest, his grandson here producing for us, super job. I'm Tom Pippins. God bless you, everybody, and go Golden Eagles. See you next time.